What's up, everybody? Welcome to this very special episode of the Back to the Game podcast. This is a sports podcast, it's true. My intention for this has always been to talk about sports in a unique and tailored way, something that is authentic to me. But I'm also an artist, and I'm also someone who loves to have deep, meaningful conversations. Sports has always just been a great medium for me to continue to learn about life, competition, and what makes everybody kind of tick. And so today I want to bring up a very special episode of this podcast, an unplanned one, but I got the opportunity to sit down with one of my great friends for almost 20 years, Tory, artist, entrepreneur, engineer, and we got to talking about all sorts of things from artistry, family, faith, film, even a little sports, just life. And I asked him if I could upload this conversation onto this podcast because I felt I wasn't ready to fully define or limit what it could be. For me, it's just a creative way for me to express my thoughts, express how I see the world, how I interpret the world, and this conversation is a great embodiment of that. So if you're into faith, if you are into nuanced conversation, if you're into learning about some of my background as an artist, as an actor, and as a creative, as well as Brandon and his company Formless, which gives creatives, particularly musicians, new and innovative ways of spreading their music. Check this out. Also, if you're big on faith, which I am, this is definitely an episode for you. And the marriage between faith and creativity and artistry is a big theme here. So without further ado, this is a very special episode, a little bit of a veering off the path, but into the same direction we want to go in, of the Back to the Game podcast. Appreciate you guys. Here's a conversation between Brandon Tory and myself. Peace and love.
Question: Do you prefer being called Sam, Samuel, Sammy?
Not Sammy.
That's what I figured too.
Yeah, that was my mother gave me that, and I kind of grew out of that one.
Nah, it's funny because I've been telling a lot of my friends as we get older, it's like, yo, we should call ourselves our actual names. Like my man Jimmy, his real name is Jean-Marie. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yo, you should call yourself Jean-Marie. He was like, nah. But like a lot of people, I'm like, yo, I think the original names are actually stronger.
That's funny you say that. So one of the first things that happened when I went into like deep acting training and I went into a 2-year conservatory, that the teacher on the first day, she asks you, okay, what's your name? What do you want to be called?
Yeah. That's
the first thing and for the rest of the year. And I remember being like, you know what? I want to be called Samuel, Samuel.
Yeah.
So when people call me Samuel, I like for people to pronounce it in Spanish.
Samuel.
If not, just call me, yeah, exactly. If not, just call me Sam. Just call me Sam.
It's so powerful. It's important, even on the, because, the way that we kind of scheduled this call was based on the post that I did about Jesus. And I was thinking of your name and the meaning of Samuel being the prophet who anointed David, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like in our younger days, I don't think we think of the full meaning of our names. You know what I mean? And so it's good to see you stepping into that, into like your actual name.
Yeah, that's funny, bro, because that's something that I've always thought about, actually. Even my middle name is not given. I gave it to myself. I was in Puerto Rico in 2020, right before the pandemic, and I was doing the show at the time, Beauty and the Baker, and I was having this real spiritual experience. And on this one day I was off from shooting, I went to Old San Juan, and I was walking around. It was a Monday, so it was like open, but not a lot of people. Yep. And I wound up going all through the edge of Old San Juan, right on the water. And I met these people, and they were I asked them to take a picture of me because I was alone. And then I kept walking. I wound up in the middle of a cemetery, like by myself.
In Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. I wound up sitting there, met the first I don't know why I'm forgetting the word right now, but the first mural that I saw had my mother's name on it. It was really weird. And then I sat down, meditated there, and then I left and I went and I kept walking. And that couple that I saw that took my picture, they were in a bar, and they waved me over to come in and get to know each other. And she was like, "Oh yeah, my name is Maria Jose." And I was, in that moment, I was like, "Oh, you have a masculine and a feminine name. How cool!" And I've heard that before, but for some reason, in that moment, it landed really well. And I was like, because my whole life, I've told my parents, I'm not a proper Latino with no middle name. Like, how did you guys not give me a middle name? Like, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
And I told them, I'm going to give myself a middle name and it's going to come to me. And then sure enough, right in this moment, I remember, I'll never forget it. I was like, oh, that's what I need. At that time, I was very much in my artist. I was very much like kind of maneuvering and discovering the feminine energy and presentness and empathy. You know, my hair was longer. It was a whole thing for me. And I was like, I'm going to take on a female name. And I was like, what name? And I thought of my grandma. And I was like, my only living grandparent. And I literally walked out of the bar, called my mom, and I was like, I got my middle name. And it's Maria. So, and that's why. And the minute I came back to New York from shooting that show, the next day, I went to the New York courthouse and filed for the name change.
Yo, it's so powerful.
Why are you doing this?
I remember when I saw you in New York, last time we saw you was probably years ago. I forget which hotel lobby I was in when I ran into you.
Yeah, but, I remember that.
Like I could sense the energy shift from when you took on that middle name. Like even, I don't know if it's from social media or what, but it's like, I could sense that shift of you stepping into that identity of being artistic, but also multidisciplinary and everything else that you've been doing. So it's dope to see it.
Yeah, man. It was that day was so cool running into you, bro. How's everybody? How is Betty? How's the kids?
Everybody's good, man. Kids are good. Betty is, she's doing really well. Bruce is 12 now. So my son's 12, my daughter's 5. Everybody's growing fast. Time is just flying, but,
young.
Everybody's good.
I'm glad, bro. You know, it's funny, kind of, I guess, a good segue into what I don't know what we want to talk about. I guess everything, but
everything, just catching up.
Right. It's funny because you always want to kind of pinpoint to a moment where everything turns for you.
Yeah.
And the more you try to do that, the more you realize that, oh, but wait, there was a moment right before that. And there was a moment right before that.
Right.
And then you realize that it's just like, if there is no beginning or no final moment, because you say that, and I think of myself. And recently, when people have been asking me about my journey towards reconnecting with my faith, I can pinpoint some recent moments, be like, well, but now you bring that up, and I realize I've been walking towards God for a long time now,
right?
And I used to identify it. At first, initially, it happened as me walking towards the God in me, and honoring the spirit that lives in me in every way that I could find, whether it was giving myself a middle name, whether it's, letting myself kind of exude some masculine energy, some feminine energy. What does that mean? Diving into different disciplines. I was walking towards trying to honor the spirit in me. And eventually that was going to lead to God.
That's going to lead to God no matter what. Exactly.
You go far enough down that road, and it was going to lead to God. And it's not a linear thing. It's circular, because that was my foundation. Yeah. So, what really inspired me, and I can't wait to hear about this, because I didn't know this about you. And it's crazy how long we've known each other, and how many people we know for a long time, and how much there is still to discover about your friends.
Absolutely.
I didn't know this about you. And when I heard you in that video with your friend, I heard you speaking on it, I was like, oh man, no wonder me and Brandon always kind of saw one another. We had a similar upbringing, My dad and my family, on my dad's side especially, they were very heavily Christian. Like I like to call them Old Testament Christians.
Yeah. By the book.
By the book. My dad was like one step from Hasidic Jew almost. You know, like
that's my dad.
Yeah, Seventh-day Adventist. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I'm familiar. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, they're pretty intense. They go to church on Saturday. You know, Friday nights I wasn't allowed to go out. I wasn't allowed to watch TV.
Yep.
You know, and of course I'm gonna rebel against that. You know, like. It was the prime era for that kind of stuff. And my dad's a boomer, you know, and he's like, "Oh, this is what we're doing." But something I will say, although I strayed away for a while from that path, I always understood innately that I couldn't throw away the wisdom with the wise. Mm-hmm. Whatever I felt about my relationship with my dad, whatever I felt about the church itself and how I saw it was just a little too intense, a little too serious.
Yeah.
I knew I had gained something good, because once I got a little bit older, I noticed how many of my friends didn't have like a foundation of the spiritual world and good and evil and the energies, you know, kind of existing and how we maneuver around them. And to me, church was an introduction of that. It gave me the structure of understanding that. And so I wound up walking away, but walking away with something.
Yeah.
And that always stood with me. And I always was in seeking some sort of religion, you know, whether it was art, whether it was myself. So when I heard you say that, man, and I want to hear more about like this journey for you, because I know you went into music. You're working at Google. You're doing a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
The whole time, I had no idea about this side of you.
Man, you said so many dope things there. The circular piece definitely hits with me. I think that's very common too. Because in the neighborhoods we grew up in, like there was a lot of guys who went through some traumatic experiences when we were kids, right? And what you see as we get older is not everybody's able to recover from that stuff. Like a lot of that stuff was very, very impactful in terms of how their lives played out. And then when I look for the patterns of who was able to withstand and what was the core thing, for me, it is the faith. The faith has an element. It's some type of like guarding mechanism that has kept us from some of the pitfalls that we could have gotten into if it wasn't for that. And when we were younger, at least for me, I didn't really recognize it. You get older and then you start to realize like, oh, that was actually grace. That was actually the value system that was installed by my grandparents. That was why I made that decision. I wouldn't have made that decision. I see why my friends made the other decisions. You know what I mean? And so it resonates what you're saying there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you grew up going to what church? What was
Okay. So I grew up going to a Baptist church. My grandfather was a minister at Mount Moriah Baptist Church in Brockton, Massachusetts. And so that was like my whole childhood, between Bible studies and Sunday school and everything else. My father, who married my mother very young, they were 18 when they met and 19 when they had me. He became somewhat obsessed with Messianic Judaism. So the same way you said that your dad was a Seventh-day Adventist, Judaism very similar in terms of let's keep the Sabbath, let's keep the laws of the Torah. Why are we going to church on Sunday when we should be going on Saturday? Let's go to the synagogue. Let's get the bar mitzvah. Let's do all that stuff. Even what you on your shirt, discipline is freedom, right? Discipline, Proverbs, the Torah, the code, the law. He was very strict on that stuff because the idea is if we adhere to this code, there's a sense of freedom that actually comes from that, which I think is true, which is why I think the shirt hits so hard. But what that does for a kid is it starts to repel you away because you're like, yo, this is just crazy. Like, this is a lot to take in. And I haven't really made my own decision about how I believe this stuff. It's much more just the routine. I have to go through the routine. And I remember having that debate with my father, like, I don't want to get bar mitzvah. I don't understand why you're making me do this. And he said, you'll understand when you're older. You know, you got to go. You know what I mean? So that was really my foundation.
Nothing screams getting older quite like cliches.
Yeah.
When they be, you get older and be like, God, nigga, you know, they were right the whole time.
Yeah.
And you can't avoid it. Like it does take that time. That actually makes a lot of sense to me, bro, because you're a very analytical dude. You know, even in just sharing that, you said the word code 3 times. You know, like, and I was like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny how that wound up translating and you wound up bringing those same principles to how you kind of have formulated the rest of your life. You know, like I've always known you to be someone very calculated and very understanding. Like, I can figure out a formula, but the thing about, and you know, we can't blame our parents. They always do the best that they can. Yeah. I think that maybe the piece that was missing for our parents' generation was that you have to allow for a level of creativity, because there's nothing more creative than a child. For sure. So in, you know, I see it with my nephews. I'm not a dad, but I have so many nieces and nephews right now. I'm like a pseudo dad. Yeah. And what I see is that, like, no, you can provide these guardrails. They're actually extremely important. Yep. And yes, there's going to be a lot that they don't understand till later. That's just the cycle of life. But you as a parent do have to have this awareness that, like, this is an own being who came to have this experience. And so you have to allow that space. So I think the difference that I notice between youth that repel away from faith and church, and those who kind of stay in it throughout their lives, is that there was an awareness from the parenting that I'm going to provide these guardrails for you, and I'm going to give you hard truths, but mainly I'm going to let you figure it out, and I'm going to let you be creative, and I'm not going to raise too many alarms. Now, I think for our parents, first generation Caribbean parents, that discipline was control for them. There was so much they couldn't control. There was so much around them that wasn't sure, you know, like, you know, my parents worked extremely blue collar jobs. Nothing was promised to them. Right. So I would imagine being disciplined in that way was kind of like a cushion for them, you know, like, and
it's control. I think the word you use is the perfect word. It's control. I mean, so for me, I like you mentioned that I used the word code 3 times in my description of the Tory, right? So it's because by trade, I'm an engineer. I'm a programmer. Now, what's crazy is, growing up, when I learned the Torah and all these things that my father was teaching me, it just, I couldn't find a way to make it relatable, like what it really was supposed to mean to me. But in my adult years, as I've become better and better at engineering, I realized that it's code. It's the same thing. And what's interesting about code is that it gives you a sense of control. So, for example, if you live in a very chaotic environment, everything around you is kind of like, you have no control of it, but then you adhere to a very strict code, a very strict way of doing things. And I think the military operates this way too. It gives you a sense of control within chaos. This happens in computers, like from a programming standpoint. For me, if my life is like, you know, in a very uncertain space, I can find the emotion of control in the creativity of creating code, because it's a very structured thing. And it's the same way that you describe with your parents. When you follow these principles, no matter what's going on in the world, you know, well, I know for a fact on Saturday, I'm reading this scripture. I know that we don't eat this thing. I know that we always do this thing, and we do it as a community. So not only is it a code, but it's a set of shared values. And that's what makes it so powerful, is when you start to find, oh, there are other people who share these values that I share.
Yeah. And that's so powerful, because I know for me, and it's taken kind of really straying away to really understand this, was why I'm not here to advise people to stray away, but I will say that for my personal journey, and being someone who was given those foundational pieces to navigate through life. So whenever no matter how far I went into the darkness, I always had a sense of light. Yeah. But even then, you're still kind of lost. But what I love what you said there is that sense of structure. As I kept growing, you know, I used to think it was all about just freedom. Right. Right. I thought it was always just about that. And the older I got, I realized that it was the structure that made freedom kind of worth it. You know, like, and so much, like, you can't have chaos without order, and vice versa.
I want to ask you about your story, because I think that in your discipline, this is very evident. Because in acting, I would imagine that people feel like, for me, I'm not an actor. I don't understand the discipline, right? But I would imagine that the stricter you are, with understanding the script, with the technicalities of everything else, it should probably give you a sense of freedom when you're actually acting. Whereas people would think that just by freestyling and things like that, it would work, and it probably never works that way.
No, that's 100% true. You've never acted, but listen, everything translates. And that's what, I like to say, like, listen, if you don't know what direction to take, just pick a direction, because along the way, we're all going to learn the same lessons. You're a doctor, you're an actor, you're an engineer, whatever you do, just pick it and walk it, because along the way, you're going to learn heartbreak, loss, discipline. For sure. You're going to have to learn these things in a different way, but the same things along the way. And you nailed it on the head. When it comes to, I just literally finished taping this huge audition. It was like 15 pages. And luckily this time around, they gave me some time. They gave me 5 days to prepare. Yeah. Usually it's like 2 days. And so when I saw the role and I got really excited, I went immediately into preparation, because I knew the faster I got down the technicality of this, the quicker I can get to giving them something where they can see me. Exactly. What they're looking for is me. Yep. But if I'm too busy having not nailed down the technicalities of it, what they'll see is an actor trying to get the scene right. They'll see an actor trying to give you the words or trying to put something on it, as opposed to an actor just listening to what's happening and having a real feeling and just trusting that the lines are there. Because if you're really listening, it's going to come to you. And that only comes from you having this very technical approach. Yep. And it's like that with everything, man. Like, I love that Picasso story in the coffee shop. I know that you're probably aware of it, but guy comes up to him, asks him to paint something on a paper napkin. Picasso does. He tries to take it. The guy, Picasso's like, no. And he's like, well, how much? He's like, well, $100,000. And he's like, you're going to charge me? And he's like, well, no, you're paying for the hundreds and hundreds of paintings I did before. To get to that point. To get to that point. And listen, man, something that came up in actors training, anybody who's listening who's an actor and has trained in the Meisner technique, Sandy Meisner in his book, he immediately mentions the actor's faith. And that, I remember that really resonated. Obviously my beginnings, God, faith. Oh, what's this? The actor's faith, that, and faith comes from discipline. Like, in understanding that if you just put in the work, what's meant to happen will happen. Now, that became layered, because as I went along, I realized that the actor's faith was still a little flawed for me, because it kept asking me to have faith in something that was inherently flawed, myself, And so I kept falling short of an ideal because I was imperfect. I was a sinner for in the sense of and so for me, it was kind of the inching and the crawling towards this really realization, like, no, like God, because I don't know, you probably noticed this, but recently I've been a lot more willing to put myself out there on social media. Before I was like, I'm an actor. Only if you catch me on TV or if you come see me in the theater or whatever. Like,
I feel like the business is changing though, right? Like a lot of actors, I feel like, are doing that now. Right?
Yeah, there are a ton of them, but I couldn't justify it in myself because there was some ego things in the way. Right. I couldn't I'm not that type of actor.
So, all right, Sam. So let me pause you there, because I want to give everybody more context, right? So Sam is an acclaimed actor. I've seen this guy in shows like Law and Order, movies that you've co-directed, written, things like that. Amazing stuff. But when I met you, you were not an actor. So can you tell me about the story to go from, more of your youth to where you are now as an individual and an actor, and kind of your trajectory to get here?
Brandon, thanks for that question, bro. And I appreciate that. It really does mean a lot when it comes from the people who've known you for a long time. So I didn't grow up in a home where art was an option. Art is very much a privilege. either God is walking alongside you and taking care of you, or you're sponsored. You come from privilege.
Yep.
And the reason for that is because art requires space.
Yep.
And space is also a privilege. If you're living in survival mode, you don't got space, you don't got time.
Yep.
So I grew up in a home where there wasn't a lot of space and time. My parents were workhorses. They did everything they could to provide for us. I was never missing of anything. But it was a struggle. And for the only thing I ever thought was that I had to go to college. No matter what, I was the first one in my family to go to college, to get into college right out of high school. And when I went, I still felt, I still didn't know who I was. And you know, I like to tell people I'm a late bloomer into this acting thing. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I, towards the end of my college days, my friends who were musicians and rappers, you probably remember them. I used to bring them all around.
Oh, yeah.
They were great rappers.
I remember.
So talented, and just a little ahead of their time, I think.
Yeah.
And I started hanging out with them and being in the studio all the time. And I got like a master class in hip hop.
Yeah.
Like when albums would come out, we would go buy the album, read the booklet inside, discuss it, go track for track, understand the theme that the rapper's trying to, talk about.
Wow.
Understand what you're like. We would break everything down. And unbeknownst to me, I was learning the artist process.
Yeah.
And these guys, they had a lot going on. They had their troubles, one of them from Roxbury, rough neighborhood, another one in and out of the system, but they had this incredible work ethic. Like, writing all the time, every day, memorizing verses, 5-6 songs a week. I was just I was just in it, but I didn't know my place. I was very insecure. And, but then towards my end of my college career, I came home for a summer, nothing to do, can't find a job or anything. And then my boy, who he gets his hands on one of those TV cameras, like the newscaster cameras, those big joints.
Yep.
And he's like, "Yo, I'm about to shoot a music video." This is like 2010, 2011.
Yep.
And he's like, "Yo, why don't you play a role? I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. I'll do that."
Wow.
And I remember we went to the gas station. There was a payphone there still. I don't think that payphone's there. And out in Worcester, and he's like, "You're just gonna be on the phone. You just got robbed for a bunch of work, and you just got the news, and you need to make this call. Go." And they like panned from the wide, and I did the thing or whatever, and that was fun. And we get back in the car, go back to the studio, and no one's saying anything.
Yeah.
And then eventually my boy turns around, and he's like, "Bro, you ever done that before?" And I was like, "No, no." And he's like, "Bro."
Pretty
and then
good.
Not bad. And I remember that day we got back to the studio, and he had this bunk bed in the studio because his bedroom was the studio.
Yep.
And I just remember laying on the bottom bunk bed and thinking, "Oh shit, this is it."
So you had that moment of clarity.
I had that moment, that download. And the thing about me was, though, maybe I was always late to pointing out the direction I wanted to go in. But once I saw it, I booked it.
Yeah.
I was always that way from a young boy.
Yeah.
And so I went home 2-3 days later, sat my mom down in the kitchen, was like, "Mom, I'm going to become an actor. And this is how I'm going to do it." Credit to my mom. I actually wish she would have given me a little more pushback, but my mom's a dreamer too.
Yeah.
And she didn't blink. And went for it. And I always tell people this. It felt like I had this wrapped box my whole life, this gift, and that I finally opened it and saw what was inside. Mm-hmm. That's what it felt like. Like I felt like this whole time I'm walking around with this thing, and I know that I have this gift. I have this thing. Like, what is it? What is that thing? And then finally I opened it, and I was like, "Oh wow." And I knew it was God. I knew.
I just to interject one question. I vividly remember when I moved to Los Angeles, and I don't remember exactly which piece it was, but there was something you had put out. I believe it was a trailer for a project that you were in. And I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, he's really an actor, because this isn't him. Like, whoever the character is, a lot of people who I know who act and stuff, sometimes I can see them through it. But in this piece, it was like, he's gotten really good at this. What was that process like to go from the moment of clarity to then that professionalism or that level of excellence in your craft?
Two things. Though my musician friends, unbeknownst to me, helped me establish a very, very strong foundation as to the discipline around what it means to be an artist. So I immediately had a respect. When I decided to become an actor, I was like, no, this is not just something that I'm going to do to say that I do because I'm cool. Yeah. Like, I know that this is going to take some sort of hard work, and I know that the best work hard at it, however that looks. And the other thing was sports. You know, I always looked at the top athletes as artists. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, they're, especially like basketball players and soccer players, to me, they are artists. Each of them are an individual expression. Yep. But so much of that individual expression and freedom that they express on the court or on the field came from the repetition of doing something over and over and doing the small things. So I had an innate feeling for that. Yeah. I knew talent was only going to take me so far. So when I decided to go for it and I moved to New York and went for it, I started making, I rode the wave of my talent for a few years, and that booked me I had that momentum and I wrote it. I booked a few short films. I got representation. It was cool. And then I ran into a wall, and I never forget it. Like it was yesterday. My manager at the time, they set me up with an agent, and it's like out of a movie in the sense of like, I go to this agent's office and it's like this little, in Midtown, this little office, and there's scripts stacked up all over the place. And above the script is this little Jewish lady, and she's like, I got crazy eyes. She got like glasses, and she's like, sit down. And she's like, and I'll never forget, the meeting was going well. She asked me about myself, and at the end she goes, so why should I represent you? You're competing against people who went to Juilliard, Yale, Brown, and I didn't have the answer. All I said was, just take a look at my reel, and we go from there. But I remember walking out, and she did wind up representing me for a while. We worked together for a little bit. That's how I booked my first couple of TV jobs. But I remember walking out of there, and I was like, I got to go back and train. I got to go back and train. And so, like within 6 months to a year of that, I committed myself to a 2-year conservatory at Esper, where so many great actors have come out of, and it's like a nice in between MFA from one of the most expensive schools in the world at the time, or an affordable working class training. And I found a great studio. Some friends recommended, some great actor friends that are doing great things today.
Yeah, I think that is a really strong, powerful point for the youth to hear. Some of the guys or women that's younger than us, it's like, because that was my question for you, and the answer is simple, and sometimes people don't want to hear it. It's like, yo, I went back and trained. Like, I went back and trained. I figured out what I needed to do to get educated in that particular thing, and sometimes there's a level of ego that I think can get in our way when we think, well, I'm already good enough, I'm not going to do that. And like, that's a big deal to be able to say like, no, you know what? The question she asked was valid, and I need to go train. I've had those moments as an entrepreneur, as a musician, as an engineer, every time. And it's really good to be able to make that connection to what you need to do.
Well, I guess let me turn the tables on you, because we had kind of a similar epiphany around the same time. And it was cool to see, because you turned to music, and that part of your journey was so cool and interesting to see, because the thing about you was that, like, you taught yourself how to play the guitar. You taught you like at a very kind of late staging, like,
late bloomer. Same thing you said,
late bloomer. But you had this approach of disciplinary engineer mindset, where I already saw how you broke it down into like just just a formula. This is how I'm going to do. And then you wind up marrying it with your actual career, which is something that I'm starting to be okay and learn now. I felt for a long time that I'm an actor and that's all I can do. Because if not, I won't be looked at as a good actor. I'll be looked at as someone who just
half in, half out.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So, you know, what was that moment for you? I know that it happened. I'm not sure that I know the story behind that moment.
Yeah, it's a great question. I, from a very young age, I was always a gifted programmer, a gifted engineer, because that wasn't something that I saw as a career. It was something I absolutely loved to do. So when I was like 13, my family was going through some rough financial times. Like I said, I had really young parents. So we lived in a homeless shelter at one point, in a motel. And the computer, back to your point about control, for me was how I could gain a sense of control in a world that was just like super chaotic. You know, my parents going through the divorce, the financial troubles, everything else. So I just locked in and got really good at computers. Sports for me was just something that, you know, everybody in my neighborhood played basketball, everybody hooped, everybody did these things. So I did that too. And I was embarrassed about the engineering side of myself. So even when you and I met, like that was never something that I would talk about. It was always basketball. Let's play basketball. You know what I mean? But secretly, like I was really good at computers, like really, really good from a young age. And so I had always tucked that away as like, okay, this is something I can do, but it's not what I want to do. You know, I'm still young. I want to get into artistry. I was really inspired by Kanye. As crazy as he is now, he was very inspirational to me in terms of somebody who.
Me too.
You know everybody, bro. Who was
our
blending
entire
multiple
generation.
things. Our whole generation, right? He was blending multiple things, and it was like, okay, I got to take this chance now. Which I'm sure you probably had a similar thing. It was like, let me get to New York, let me train. So that was the moment when I decided to get into music. Music wasn't something that I was gifted at from a young age. That's where the late bloomer piece came from. Engineering, I was very gifted at a young age. And I remember for me, the moment was probably I moved to Atlanta. And I thought, okay, cool. I'm going to move to Atlanta. I got this producer. He's super dope. We're going to figure out the formula. To your point, you know, I got an engineering mindset. Once I figure this out, no problem. We'll get it popping. And a friend of mine told me I should link with this other artist whose name was JB. And he had a loft downtown in Atlanta near, I forget the street, but probably near North Ave. And I go upstairs to this loft. He's the top floor overlooking the whole city of Atlanta. He's got the home studio set up. He's playing records that are produced by the guys who are making the latest Drake album. They're making the latest Rick Ross album. One of the producers he worked with was Vinyls. He had just produced the record for Drake and for Jay-Z and Rick Ross. So I'm literally walking into this room like, yo, I just moved down here from Boston thinking I'm gonna get it popping. And I just meet this dude who's like a little bit younger than me, and he's on fire. I mean, he got beats from everybody in the industry. He's overlooking the city in this penthouse loft. He got the whole setup. He's making like 3, 4, 5 songs a day. And I was like, oh my God, like, is this what it's gonna take? Because I thought that just my story alone was enough. Like, I'm gonna come down here. I got a cool story. I've been through some hardships. I'm gonna just write. And that moment was a wake up call. It was like, nah, you're not the only one that moved out here. People moved out here and they know people and they know how to do this. You know what I mean? And that was like, okay, either you're going to get serious about this or you need to pack up and go back home. Right? Like, that's really the epiphany. So I decided to try to get really good. And I was working with some guys who were really good at what they did. And I learned everything I could from them. But I started to have that awareness of like, I'm not as good at this as I thought I was. And the things that came naturally to me is really engineering, but music was something I had to learn. I had to really get immersed in and appreciate. Moving to LA was a part of that. You know, it was like the recognition that I'm not going to be a trap artist. Like, I'm not from here. I got a lot from Atlanta, but that really, I had to understand regionally that wasn't really what I was going to be able to do. So I moved to Los Angeles, got more into songwriting. How could I diversify things? Learning the guitar. You know, I walked to a studio with a guy named Fabe, and Fabe produced for Brent Faiyaz, and he's super, super dope, and a lot of people in LA know him. And so I was in his studio one day, and he's just chilling playing the guitar. And I was looking at him like, yo, if I can't do that, like, I got to be able to do that, like, to be a producer, to be an instrumentalist, to do these things. So Fabe, you know, he'll tell you, like, that day when he was playing, that was what inspired me to learn the guitar. So I went off and tried to figure that out. I took guitar lessons with a guy named Pete Fox in LA and really started to learn things. And I've always had that mindset of, if I can't do it, I can learn how to do it one way or another, And so that really was what fueled me to try to get really good at being an artist. And then the next inflection point for me was the financial reality. So you mentioned like not wanting to feel half in, half out. That was where I came up with the word formless. That was where I came up with the word multi-dream. It was, I do not want people to know that I'm a gifted engineer and also making music, because those things do not go together. And the only thing they're going to think is, well, he's not serious about music. You know what I mean? Or like, that's a nerdy thing. Why would you even be doing that? So I was trying to come up with language. I was trying to come up with words to describe that, to make it cool. Like, nah, it's formless. Like, we could do anything. We could be multiple things. Or multi-dream, we can do multiple things at once. You know what I mean? So that was where that came from. And what happens, and to kind of bring this full circle, what brings you closer to God is when you hit rock bottom, when you hit something where it's like, there is no way through this other than the truth. And for me, it was when I had 1 million streams on Spotify, I had Timbaland on FaceTime, I had my wife and my son in LA, I had everything trending up in my mind, but no money, to the point where it was like, yo, I don't know what we're going to do financially. And I can't be in this position as a father, as a husband, as all these things. So I have to find some way to make this make sense. And so that was when I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to have to join big tech. I'm going to have to go to Apple and take this job as an engineer in Silicon Valley. And whatever comes with that, I'm going to have to figure it out. But like, this is the truth. The truth is I'm really good at that. And for me to be passing up that money just because I'm uncomfortable and insecure with what that means for my image no longer made sense. And so that was where the multi-dream idea came from.
That's so beautiful, man. God, flowers grow from the dirt.
For sure.
Like it really is that, bro. And well, I'm so proud of you, man, because I've always admired you from close and from afar, being a father, being an artist. I've always hesitated into committing to potential fatherhood because I'm an artist, because I've always felt like I don't want to necessarily put someone in that situation so kudos to you. It's so inspiring. Because for me, I've come to the realization in the last couple of years that I always wanted to be a father. I always operated as one. And I think for me personally, kind of get a little vulnerable here, my upbringing and some of the things that I had to overcome, some of the traumas, it shied me away from it because of what I saw and what I perceived in my own experience of fatherhood. And the thought was, well, I won't be that. And the best way not to be that is not to become that.
Just
like
reject it all together.
Yeah, reject it all together. And then, and then my nephews came into my life, and they kept growing. And then everything kind of just hit me all at once. It was always what I wanted. I always, you've known me for a while. I've always been this person in the sense of deeper meanings, motivation, determination. What are we talking about? Competition? I always wanted to. I've always liked to coach and to.
You've always been a leader. Yeah. And that's one thing that I think you would enjoy about fatherhood too, is the fact that you can build people up.
Right. I look forward to the opportunity now more than ever. Not rushing myself into it, but feeling more intentional about the idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, man. So that's an incredible thing that you were able to do. Because I remember when Formless took place and I took notice. I was like, yes, exactly, exactly, man. So that's so perfect. Something that I wanted to ask you about, because this is something that's been really, really vibrant in me recently, and it's kind of been coming up in my conversations with a lot of different people. Is now that you've kind of been turning more towards your faith and something that I've told people recently is like, listen, to me, faith, religion, it's like a language. Some people speak Chinese, some people speak Hindu, some people speak Spanish, and others English. Most likely the one that's going to make the most sense to you is the one that you were taught first. What's the foundational piece for you? But the biggest thing for me recently, and I wonder if you relate, and maybe you came to this more when you hit that rock bottom, you decided to go to Apple, and then you decided to merge all of these worlds together. For me, much of my multi-hyphenate existence wasn't able to fully blossom up until recently, because I realized, whether I was willing to admit it or not, even though I believed in God, I had not been putting my faith in him.
Right.
And in turn, the thing is about humans is that you're wired for faith. Right. Like your original programming comes with wanting to believe in something outside of yourself. And if you don't believe in God, eventually you'll be the God you believe in. But the problem with that was that, like I mentioned earlier, you're flawed. And so what I started to feel like with every risk, with every time, with every audition, with everything, every project that I did or didn't do, I felt like I was bungee jumping with no harness. Mm-hmm. And every time I survived, and but every time it got scarier, because what if this is the time I don't?
Right.
What if that doesn't? And suddenly when I refound my faith and God's voice spoke to me so clearly, and Jesus spoke to me so clearly, I realized I had discovered this gift that I had. I knew he had given it to me, and I was like, all right, peace. And I ran off.
Yo, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. And I ran off with it, and I'm like, and God just like, okay.
And then he's God, like, oh, you thought that wasn't me. You didn't think that was me.
Yeah. No. And think about God, he's like a good father, right? Like with your son, when he was little, if he fell, scraped his knee, you didn't necessarily run, pick him up. You know, like you kind of, okay, párate. You got him. If it really comes to it, you got him. But that I felt like that, and then I look back at my journey and all the times that I fell, all the times I came so close to not going down a very dark path, all the people that I came across in this art industry, that its main currency is spirituality, especially acting, in the sense that you're the instrument. There's not a guitar, you're the thing. Right. And then when God's voice spoke to me, I realized that's when I really was like, oh, I don't care. I am going to upload that video. Mm-hmm. I am going to start that sports podcast. I've loved sports my whole life. If you ever been my friend, it won't go an hour without me bringing up sports.
Tom Brady.
But all of those parts of myself, I was hiding, because I had this godlike image of what I was supposed to be like as an actor and as an artist.
Right.
And then it was like I went to the edge of the bungee jump again, but this time I had God. I had a harness. Yep. And now I can like jump off and really enjoy it, because I know he's got me.
Yeah.
And that has been so powerful for me. I wonder if there was a moment like that for you.
Yeah.
And if it was during that Apple thing, did it come later?
So I had the exact same experience. And for me, it was before I put out my album Unicorn. So I was working on my album Unicorn, and I was talking to my mother a lot, and I was like, I feel like I keep going in circles. She was like, what are you talking about? I said, like, well, I meet Timbaland, and it's like I'm right there, but then it doesn't click. I meet Leor Cohen, I'm right there, but it doesn't click. I meet Jimmy Iovine, I'm right there, but it doesn't click. I'm like, in every story that I've read about an artist or anybody like me, there's always that moment where they meet the right person, and then the door is supposed to open, they go to the next level. Why do I feel like I keep going in circles and like it's not breaking through to the next level? And she was like, well, what would you do if it was code? Now, mind you, my mother she knows nothing about programming. She knows nothing about engineering. So she's coming at this just from like, well, I don't know, like, you're a programmer. Like, what would you do if this was a program? I was like, why would you ask? That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. She's like, I'm just asking, like, what would you do? And I said, okay, well, if it was code, it would be a good thing. She said, why? I said, because in code, if you can reproduce the problem, then you can always fix it. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, in code, if sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, that's the worst thing, because then you never know if it's broken or fixed. But if it always fails, then that means that in the future, as long as I see it coming, I can measure to see whether or not the thing that happened last year is going to happen again this year. I said, so in code, you just slow down and you wait for the failure to come that you know is going to come. And then you change one thing to see if that fixes it. She goes, oh, okay, you need to do that in life. I said, what? She said, do that in life and sit and make sure that you're scheduling time to pray to God, to incorporate him in what you're doing. So I said, okay. So scene 2, I'm at a dinner with a guy who's really well connected in Hollywood. He knows all these people. And he says something like, you know, if there's anything anybody needs here, like I can connect you. I know this person, that person. And I have this ego thing. And I had this in sports too, where it was like, yo, I'm not trying to hit none of that. Like whatever you're talking about, I don't need your help. Right. And it hit me when my mother said, I said like, oh, you know what? That might be the issue. Because if I keep having that mentality, then when I meet the right person, I won't be open to them being able to help me. So I said, you know what? I actually do need help. I need help to try to get this situation across the line. He said, okay, call me tomorrow. I'll have my lawyer hit you up. So I said, oh, cool. So I've opened myself up to be more vulnerable. And then this guy became a really great mentor to me. And he started to be able to see things about 5 to 10 years ahead of what I could see just because he had more experience. And so situations that I was rejecting in the past, for example, Dallas Austin, who became my first investor, I was a little bit nervous about that. I was jaded, like, oh, this isn't going to work. Damn. And the guy I'm talking about said, no, he's an older version of you. I remember him when he was your age. He's going to be really good for you. He said, do whatever he needs you to do. I said, okay, great. So I did the deal with Dallas. Dallas ends up becoming my first angel investor in Formless. So just that tweak of her saying, like, whatever's that issue, slow it down and see if it comes up again in your life and change the way you're viewing it. That was massive for me.
It manifested in front of your face, like, you know
came
that
in front of my
meme
face.
from Hangover, like with all the math signs.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Because I could imagine. I hear that, and I'm gonna take that away because it's so funny. I've had the reverse journey, so I'll tell you how. But it's so just to kind of how I'm understanding this. Your mom just kind of highlighted to you to kind of put it in how your brain works, which to me probably sounded like an innocent question, but she knows her son, and so you know. And I actually do remember that about you. I remember your style of play on the court was very bullish.
Yeah, it was, you know, like
I'm a score every point. I'm not passing. You know, like,
yeah, I didn't want to hear nothing. I didn't want to hear any instruction from anybody. And that's a problem.
And so like, so it was like, all right, so what's the formula? And this is the one thing that keeps. Let me try something new in that spot.
Yes.
Wow, that's very powerful, bro. That's extremely powerful to look at it that way.
Yeah.
So for me, it was the reverse. I've always been very vulnerable, and I've always been open, like collaborative. I've always been a strong communicator, not only verbally but emotionally. And so, you know, the kind of the 6'6" big hands version of an actor. It's like that's, you know.
I didn't know that about you. I thought you was more guarded, to be honest with you.
Sure, I think especially when it came to male friendships, because I had some like rough relationship with my dad, and you know, like I was mostly raised by women.
Yeah.
I think if you ask any of my female friends at that time back then, they'll tell you something different.
Got it. Yeah.
And so so I totally see that. But mostly I was a very vulnerable person, willing to do that, and I wasn't bullish enough. And so now, thank you for sharing that with me, because now I have a much more language to that I can apply, because what I've had to learn is now, okay, yes, bring all of that vulnerability, understand the people that are telling you, but understand that you've been given a certain vision for you to execute. And you know, one of the things that I always say to myself as someone who was always, as a young man, trying to give advice and do is like, maybe all the things that the wisdom that you have, maybe all of those things were for you, you know, like, and not always for anyone else. So that's very powerful, because for me to take that away, it's like, it's that thing, you know, you're walking on the journey. We're all going to learn the same things when we're supposed to learn them, you know, and having faith and trust and all that stuff.
I mean, that's why I love The Alchemist. I think have you read The Alchemist?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
That book is like so powerful, because it just tracks with everything we're saying there. But that idea of like, if you keep having the same problem, that's a good thing, because you should be able to see it coming next time and change something about your approach.
And change something about it. Yeah, for sure, bro. For sure. Wow, that's so powerful, man. I'm gonna sit with that all day. Yeah, dude. This was fun. This was fucking fun.
Yo, we gotta talk about Sinners before we bounce, because I just saw
I was gonna say. Yeah, you saw. Oh, you saw it.
I saw it on Friday. Yeah,
dude. Ain't no way. And I know that I sent you that thing I wrote about it.
Yeah.
But ain't no way you write that and make that if you don't believe in God.
I agree. So okay, let me give you my thoughts on the film, and you're probably not gonna like it. So
okay, listen, bro.
I thought that the first half of the movie was phenomenal. It was probably the most fun I've had in a movie since, I don't know, Avatar. I don't know, something huge like that. Like, just the acting, Michael B. Jordan was just incredible. He played two characters. It felt like two different people. It was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, the jokes were hilarious to me. Like, the cultural references was all incredible. So I was having a really, really good time. I'm not really a horror movie guy, so that might be the issue. But the minute the vampires came in, it just fell apart for me. It was just like, this seems very So my overall review was like, I didn't really like it that much. Like, it was like, I loved the way it started, but then it just felt real thin. After that, like, I went to my group chat. I was like, yo, Sinners is trash. That's just to see what
just to be the antagonist.
Because I'm like, yo, okay, a couple things that bothered me about it. One was, I get cultural appropriation. Right, and we've all experienced it. Like, we've thrown the house party where, like, the white guy knocks on the door and says, like, can you turn? Like, I understand that, and, like, that's a real thing. But I also feel like it's just very divisive, and I feel like it's like a repeated thing that I don't think needs to be harped on as much as this. Like, that was the central theme of the film, which I found to be just a little bit thin. The other issue I had with the film was, but this actually I thought more about later, was the narrative around Preacher Boy. When I saw the film, I thought, okay, well, in the end, he did, the Lord's Prayer, which he learned from the Bible, and that didn't work. So I guess they're just trying to say Christianity is, like, worthless, right? Later on, though, I started to think about it. I said, what's funny is Preacher Boy was the only person who survived. So is it the case that they were trying to say that despite the fact that he rejected his father's teaching outwardly, in his moment of distress, he still returned to it? And whether or not it was directly a result of that, Preacher Boy, because of his foundation, was the only person who survived the Juke Jam. So that made me have a different appreciation for the movie when I started to think a little bit deeper. But my first reaction was like, amazing first half, but in the second half, I didn't really like it. So what's your response to that?
Well, first of all, you're going to be surprised by my response, because the first point you made, it was the second point. The first thing about vampires falling thin, what I will say about that is that I really appreciated what Ryan did in not falling trapped to, like, we're going to show you everything. Right. Like, I liked that it was like, oh, it's a vampire. He's going to bite someone. Cut. You get it.
I like that. Yeah. That was
like,
good.
because that it was like, he gave it taste, and he understood very much the principle that a lot of filmmakers, the great ones, understand, is that people have more fun in their imagination than you could ever show them.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it.
You only need to show them exactly what's necessary. Their mind will do the rest.
Yes.
And that's more fun.
Yes.
Because once you show them, they can't go left or right with it,
Yes.
And so I appreciated that, because we've already had so many vampire movies. We've already seen the chomping down of the neck so many different ways.
Yep.
He only did it when it was absolutely necessary.
Yep.
And I thought that was he's a smart dude. He's a smart dude. And so I appreciated that. To your second point, though, I actually agree. I'm gonna try to simultaneously do something here and pull up this thing that I wrote. I sent it to you, but I just want to have it as a reminder as to what I said.
Yep.
But I mentioned it to a couple people, and people kind of pushed back on it, and I understood the pushback after they kind of mentioned what they mentioned.
Yep.
However, I have been kind of in inner circles, in the artist circles, and I've been harping this whole beating a dead horse.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Like it's like, okay, at some point we have to understand that we are manifesting our reality.
Yes.
And if we constantly are painting a certain kind of picture, then we cannot be complaining when it is the reality that faces us.
That is exactly.
And so, for me, it would have been much more interesting. And this is something that I wrote about. It would have been much more interesting. But and a couple of people pushed back because at the moment I wasn't aware of it. I was aware of it, but not as consciously. The whole the Irish tie-in, how they were oppressed and they became the vampires, and now they're coming, and that's why the vampire is Irish. Get it? Got it. It's true. The Irish people do have a long history of oppression. But I thought, man, I don't always want my art to be direct reflections of life. Something that my favorite acting teacher and Bill Esper, Sandy Meisner's protege, says in his book is art is not life. Art is the wine to life's grapes.
Picasso said something like that too.
Yeah. It's like, it's elevated. And so I would have loved to have seen, even if everybody else was white and Irish or whatever, I would have loved to seen the lead vampire have been a black dude. What would that have done if Coleman Domingo was in that role? Like, he's an incredible actor. And the thing is that because we're playing this whole, pun intended here, black and white thing, a lot of talented actors of colors are missing out on fun villain roles because all the villains have to be white. And the white actors, they'll play it humble or whatever, but they love they're like, yeah, I'll be that fucking racist dude. I'll be that, because that's like fun. I know them, my friends I have white actor friends. They have so much fun with those roles.
Yeah.
And, I just wondered, like, what if you would have made that role someone of color? Then you completely play into a whole deeper level of like, good and evil doesn't know color.
Well, okay, so I did appreciate that. Yeah. At the end of the day, black people were vampires too, right? Like Stack got bit, he became a vampire. That was dope because that is true. But I feel like the core, Wait.
I said Diddy.
Yes. I feel like the core plot that the whole movie sat on, and I'm not a filmmaker, so this is just me as a fan just watching it. The whole core plot was, there's racial division in America and we can never thrive because our oppressors keep messing up the party, right? And now we have like a Rambo moment where let's kill the whole KKK before that to me didn't even have anything to do with the movie. Like that was just like thrown in at the end, which I thought was just super random because that guy was not a vampire. He had no other role in the film other than to get shot at the end. And it was just like, it didn't feel like as much of a revelation to me as everybody kept telling me it was supposed to be. Because the reality is, and again, this is where it becomes what your faith is. But in the Bible, every time that God's people are oppressed, it is God who is using the oppressor to teach them something. It is never the case that the Babylonian Empire or the Assyrian Empire or whatever empire that comes in and takes God's people and oppresses them, it is never the case that they are the bad guys. It is the case that the God's people were idolatrous, that they had their own issues, that they did not follow the code. And because of that, God let them fall into the hands of the Babylonians. And so this narrative that we keep making of, oh, it's the white people's fault and like now we're oppressed and like they're messing up the party, it's not the truth. And we keep perpetuating it. And it's actually preventing, I think, us from realizing what the actual truth is, which is what is on your shirt, which is that discipline is freedom. If we follow the actual code, it shouldn't matter what these oppressors or other people are doing to us because God, if you believe in God, God rewards those who seek him. And that's the actual secret to this thing. And the movie, I think, kind of distorts that. That's
wow. Powerful. Clip that. Post that. Listen, I mean, how many times did God send Moses back to Egypt?
Yes.
Because like, that actually always stood out to me in recently reading about that story, is that God would always be like, when you go, they're going to reject you again.
They're going to reject you again.
Because when you go, they're going to reject you again because I'm not going to open their hearts yet.
Yes.
Because my point is to prove a point to you.
Exactly. That's what it's about.
And so, and so, yes, I think, but that is a bit of, I think we fall trapped to the flesh, you know, where I think the story still got another step to go in fully serving the spirit. Yeah. And that's why I thought just a casting choice might have done that. You know, I understood my friends who like they were trying to.
Well, the casting choice would have, but that would have opened up a whole. First of all, I think it would have been dope. But what that would have opened up is the question. This probably would have went back to Black Panther, which is, well, is it really a skin color thing? Because the slaves were in a black region when they were sold into slavery, and so you had that inner conflict between people that had the same skin color. It's never really been a skin color thing. Right, it's lineage, it's tribal, it's deeper than skin color.
This very controversial thing to say.
Very controversial, you know, like, but yeah.
very controversial thought to explore. Yeah. And the thing that I want to get across to anyone listening to this is that's okay, because you should be able to explore a thought so that even if you're wrong about the the direction you were going in the exploration of it, the truth will resonate much deeper because you allowed yourself to take it there. Yeah. You know, as opposed to shutting yourself off because that's just the way it's supposed to be. You know, I love the story. I know it's totally made up, but I love the story of the 5 monkeys in a cage. You know that story?
No, I haven't heard.
So, it's 5 monkeys in a cage, and there's a banana on the top, and the zookeepers, anytime a monkey tries to go and grab the banana, they hose them down with like fire hydrant water. Yep. And so eventually the monkeys know, don't go get the banana because that means we're going to get hosed down. So then what the zookeepers do is that they take one of the monkeys and they put a new monkey in. So what does that new monkey try to do? He tries to go and get the banana at the top. Yeah. But then they get hosed down. So the other 4 monkeys go attack the one monkey, and he doesn't know why he's being attacked by his other monkeys. All he wants to know that he wants to get the banana. So eventually they replace all of the monkeys, and they're all fighting each other, and they don't know why.
That's crazy.
And they don't know why. They don't know they don't know the original reason. And I think with so many things, with God, art, there's so many things that we have gotten to the point in our evolution, especially in this clickbait, short attention span, that we have stopped short of being willing to ask why. Mm-hmm. You know, like you know, and one of the things that I say often is whatever acting didn't give me in riches and in wealth, it's made me rich in another thing, and that is in curiosity and in time. You know, the biggest thing that you have, a lot of what you have as an actor is time. You have time, you know, your schedule, you have to be flexible. So you have a lot of free time, especially early in your journey. And then you're constantly being pushed to be curious, to stay childlike, how Jesus says. Mm-hmm. So that kind of to what you're saying is like being willing to kind of explore that thought in the way you just did is where I think nuance, good conversation, growth actually happens. I think so much of the conversation now, particularly in the short form era, is stopping short of exploring a thought just because, whoa, hey, that's taboo. But why is it taboo? Because if you ask Ryan, deep down in the core, he's trying to tell a story of good and evil. Yeah. And people with good intentions fall into bad places, and it goes all people, even the ones just trying to get it right. You know, life will come for you. That's the nature of the existence.
And I gotta say, Ryan Coogler is brilliant. Like the film was brilliant. The storytelling was brilliant. My main hangups was those plot things, which I think are debatable. But I got to give him credit that it was such a conversation starter to even be having this dialogue. And sometimes that's the purpose of the art. You know, I think Picasso once said, somebody asked him, why don't you paint beautiful women? Why do you paint these disfigured things, right? He said, because when you're at dinner, the woman in front of you is far more beautiful than any painting I put on the wall. It would be disrespectful for me to try to replicate her beauty. You should pay attention to her. My painting is only supposed to be a part of the surrounding thing that creates the conversation between you and the people that you're actually with. And I thought that was just a gorgeous way to think of art.
There is a man who understood discipline. You know, like he's known for his straight what's the word I'm looking for? If not efficiency, but how much he put out.
Output.
And how many paintings he created, him and Van Gogh. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what happens in discipline is a true understanding of humility. Mm-hmm. Like you get to a certain point where you do something over and over and over and over, and it still remains hard. You know, it's still that you have no other choice to be like, oh wow, like this is so much bigger than me. You know, to be humble about it. You know,
and also to be the expert. I mean, it's not like he couldn't paint beautiful women. He painted plenty of beautiful women, but he got to that point in his career where he realized, oh, this isn't actually the purpose of art. It goes deeper than that. That was so cool.
Wow. Yeah, man. Well, that movie was great. I think Ryan did a really great thing. It was entertaining. Yeah. Yes, it did dabble into that, but we are being very nitpicky here.
Yes.
I think out of all the movies that I've seen recently, he did the most masterful job about not fully making it that whole black and white. Mm-hmm. Like it was actually about some characters, you know, and the story. So, and you know, we talked about it a little bit over text, but I guess a lot of people of faith would hesitate to go see this movie, but coming from what I call the warrior of light, in the sense of like being
afraid to interact with what's out there, so you can have a position on it.
The sinner title was what drew me in, because if there's one thing I know from the Bible is that I'm a sinner. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. I'm not escaping that. You know, like there's no way out away from that. So, you know, I was drawn to it. And I think that has been the kind of balance that I've been working on and trying to find between now being someone walking in faith and trying to be do right in the eyes of God, and also be this individual artist, understanding that my humanity is the point, and that the reason why Christianity called me back. I mean, I've studied Hinduism, I studied Buddhism, I've studied all of them quite deeply, and I still love many principles of all of many different walks of faith. But what really hooked me was that, like, he took on the flesh. Yeah. You know, he took on the flesh.
He entered the movie.
He entered the movie. Yeah. You know, and when he took on the flesh, it gave me permission to, you know, because something I heard recently in church by a pastor was in every other walk, in every other faith, they ask you, be good, you know, do good deeds. And that's great and good. But the truth is this, I'm stealing the word, Pastor Ryan here, but he said, the truth is there isn't no amount of good deeds you could ever do to fill that void. Right. You know, like it'll become an addiction like any other. Like I'm doing good deeds. The truth is, no matter what, you are a sinner and you live with that. Mm-hmm. And there's grace in knowing that you're forgiven, and that not only you're forgiven, but he took on the flesh and died for you. Mm-hmm.
To repay that. Yeah.
To repay that, you know, and so that's kind of what has really kind of anchored me in being an artist and walking through the darkness. You know, is understanding, like, listen, the more I try to avoid the darkness, the more it's gonna find me. Mm-hmm. You know, like whenever it appears, I might as well turn to it and ask it, what do you want? You know, like, what is it? What can we explore here? What can we learn? You know, that's like the difference between the politician who sends the soldiers off to war and the actual soldiers. Mm-hmm. You know, I think that there's a lot of us. I think artists are spiritual soldiers. Mm-hmm. in the warfare of spirituality. Artists are soldiers that go out to the field, and their weapons are their souls. You know?
Yeah. So I'm writing a book called so it's a multi-series, but the first volume is called The Death of an Artist. And I kind of came to the conclusion, I was in London and I kind of just disconnected from life here for a little while. I came to the conclusion that Jesus is the blueprint for artistry. And it's a lot of what you just said, but to connect it with scripture, Paul says that the word is the sword. So the weapon is actually the word. And if you listen to what Jesus says, if you listen to even what you said in terms of interacting directly with the darkness, Jesus did that. We saw him go and talk directly to the devil when he was tempted. But he's very technical with how he does it. He doesn't just say anything. Most of what he says, he quotes the Old Testament. He quotes scripture. And so I think that you're absolutely right that as artists, we have this kind of mandate to interact with the world and to experience these things so that we can bring the message to light. But what really matters, and you know this as an actor, what matters is the words that we say, the script. Like, what are the the truth. What are the pieces that we're taking and then bringing them to the light to make sure people understand? And that was what Jesus was so excellent at. I mean, you look at somebody who knew everything, but then the words he chose to speak were so precise and so weren't really that many. I mean, he didn't write a book. All the other guys wrote books. He wrote no book. He just said a couple things and everybody remembered what he said. And one of the things he said that I found to be the most powerful thing was when he said, "Destroy this temple, I'll raise it again in 3 days." And all the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they were like, you could never rebuild the temple in 3 days. That's ridiculous. But he knew that his body was the temple. So he was saying, if you kill me, I'll raise myself in 3 days. And that to me is evidence of the fact that in life, through artistry, through all the things that we're learning, it's really that we're supposed to be building the temple within, which is what the thing you mentioned in the beginning, right? It's like we're learning these things because we are a temple of the Spirit. And so we're supposed to be learning things and evolving and adapting through the failures, through the successes, through all those things. And that is part of the hardest part of having faith and walking with God. But also it gives me hope to realize, like, okay, even if something doesn't go right, I'm supposed to be the thing that's changing through this experience.
Wow. Yes, that's exactly it. And I want to encourage artists, because I know it's happening. I know that there is, like, I could feel it. You know, artists are the canary in the coal mine. Mm-hmm. That's something that's known. When artists have an inkling or an instinct for something, it's most likely going to be mainstream very soon.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you get that when as a musician too.
Yep.
You know, you have a sixth sense for what's to come, and you can sense there is a spiritual revolution happening.
Yep.
And I want to kind of, based on just what you just said, I want to encourage any artists out there. Listen, if you're being called to the light, for lack of a better, more simpler term, being cliche here, but if you're being called to the light, dispel the idea that that's going to come at the price of your artist.
Right.
In fact, it might be what sets it free. It might be what finally allows you as an artist to step in fully into what you're supposed to communicate, and stop worrying about how that communication is going to come across, because that's the ego. That's the God in you. You thought it was supposed to be like this. Sure, it might still be, but the more you block, the more you block because of your hard-headedness in that way.
Yep.
The more you restrict it. And actually, for me, I've never been a better artist than I've been since I found God again, since I refound God in my life. I've never been more present, and I'm a pretty present person. I'm a pretty empathetic, in tune, connect. I like human connection. I've always walked with that energy, but now this awareness has made my artist vibrate even stronger.
Yep.
You know, like the sense of joy that I find with the responsibility is now, it's like marrying each other. So I kind of want to, just piggybacking off what you said, encourage anybody who, just like when you were called into your artistry, you went all in. If now that has led you to be called by something bigger than that, that's okay too, because your artist will always be a part of you.
Yeah.
And no one's going to be able to take that away from you. And there has never been a better time to be authentically yourself, you know? And
not just better, but probably never been a more important time. I mean, just with how fast the world is changing, there's never been a more important time to start saying what you believe to be the truth.
The truth shall set you free.
The truth will set you free. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Bro.
Dope.
Wow, thank you so much, bro.
Yeah. We can wrap it there.
Cap, but
yeah.
But bro, we should do it again.
We should definitely do this again. I've been trying to, that's what I've been doing. All the homies are like, yo, let's talk. I'm like, yo, look, do you mind if we record it? Because there's a lot of stuff that we say as men to each other that I just feel like we might as well let people know who we actually are.
I mean, we could do a whole thing on manhood, bro.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you about that. That's a whole nother topic. That's a whole nother thing, man. But you're awesome, dude. I'm so proud of you, man.
Likewise.
I'm so glad to call you a friend, bro. It really, it you know, you don't know it when you're around each other, 21, 22 years old. You don't see that, like, oh, wow, in 20 years, this is going to be someone
that's crazy
that I admire, that I look up to, that I consider a friend. You know, all you guys, Eugene, you, Roland, everybody, man.
Yeah.
I have a deep love and respect for all of you. You know, I'm always praying for you guys.
Likewise, Sam. I couldn't say it better myself, bro. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And let's do this again sometime.
All right, my brother. You already know.
All right, peace.
Stay formless.
You already know.
Peace, bro.